I never thought the end of the world would feel so ordinary. That's the first thing I remember thinking on my first day at the Eschaton Research Group. A name like that should have made me pause, should have sounded like a cult or a doomsday fringe. Not a corporation with brushed steel doors and a lobby that smelled faintly of lemon polish. But when you're broke, half out of options, and trying to escape a past that won't leave you alone, you take what you can get. The posting had seemed vague, but promising. Research associate, competitive pay, benefits, travel included. They promised stability, mystery, and a chance to work on projects of profound historical significance. I didn't realize until much later that profound was there. Polite word for dangerous, from the beginning. I could feel something humming beneath the company's polished exterior. The security desk in the lobby wasn't manned by rent-a-cops, but by silent men in gray uniforms, each with the same blank expression. Behind them hung a painting not of the founders or shareholders, but of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, rendered in oil with colors so vivid. I swear I saw the pale horses I move as I passed. I told myself I was imagining it. Stress, lack of sleep, but even then, a knot tightened in my chest. My interview had been conducted in a windowless office on the 12th floor. The man who questioned me didn't introduce himself. He just smiled, thin-lipped, and asked if I had any religious sensitivities that might interfere with my duties. I answered no, though I wasn't sure what that meant. He nodded once, then slid a non-disclosure agreement across the table thick enough to be a small novel. That was the first moment. I should have walked away. Instead, I signed. The money was too good, the benefits too tempting, and a dark, gnawing part of me, the part that didn't like to admit how badly I wanted a fresh start, leaned into the unknown. If the Eschaton Research Group was willing to pay me to chase Bible stories, what was the worst that could happen? The second hint came before orientation even began. I had been asked to wait in the employee lounge, a sterile room of white walls and flickering fluorescent bulbs. A coffee machine sat in the corner, half full, steaming quietly. No one else was there, at least, not at first. Then I noticed the binder. It was left open on the table beside me, thick with typed pages. On its front cover, stamped in blocky black ink, was a phrase I'll never forget. Protocol, containment of eschatological phenomena. I thought it was a joke, or maybe some training manual I wasn't supposed to see. But as I skimmed a page, a cold sweat broke over me. There were diagrams of angelic hieroglyphs, passages from Revelations, and photographs of strange lights burned into the sky over different parts of the world. Notes in the margin read like warnings, though I didn't yet understand their weight. Never acknowledged them directly. They feed on recognition. Before I could turn the page, someone entered. A woman in a gray skirt suit, carrying a clipboard. She looked at me, then at the binder, and her expression went tight. Without a word, she closed it and tucked it under her arm. "You'll learn what you need to," she said softly. Then she gestured for me to follow as I walked behind her, deeper into the building's quiet corridors. I couldn't shake the thought that I had already seen too much, and that maybe I was never meant to leave. The woman led me through the hallways in silence. The deeper we went, the more the air seemed to change, cooler, heavier, as if the building itself were exhaling around us. I expected more offices, more cubicles, but the floors grew emptier with every turn. The carpets disappeared, replaced with cold concrete. The walls narrowed. By the time we reached the final elevator, I realized we were already far below ground. The ride down was long, too long. There were no buttons, no lights to mark the floors, just the hum of machinery and the faint vibration beneath our feet. I counted the seconds in my head until I lost track. At last, the doors opened with a hiss, and the woman gave me the smallest of smiles. "Welcome," she said. "You'll be working here." The facility was vast. A hangar-like space stretched before me, broken into smaller wings and sections, each lit by harsh white lamps. There were rows of sealed doors with biometric locks, rooms marked by stenciled codes rather than names. I thought of archives, laboratories, or maybe morgues, and then I noticed the smell. Not rot, exactly something drier, older, like burned paper and incense. Trapped in the vents, we walked past glass windows where I glimpsed men in lab coats analyzing fragments of stone tablets. Another room held a team examining a torn, scorched manuscript under ultraviolet light. Every surface was clinical, but the objects inside hummed with age and unease. The woman stopped before a steel door and turned to me. "Before you begin, you need to understand the rules. We all follow them, without exception." Her tone was even, but her eyes betrayed the weight of what she was about to say. She produced a folded sheet of paper and placed it in my hand. The text was typed in neat black font, but the words themselves felt anything but ordinary. I'll write them here as I first read them. Rules of conduct for level 12 operations. Do not enter section Delta after 3:33 a.m. if you are already inside. Remain silent until escorted out. If you hear weeping in the vents, do not respond. Do not search for the source. Continue your work. Every morning check your workstation chair. If it has been moved, even slightly, alert your supervisor immediately. When reviewing recovered text, do not read any passage aloud. Silent transcription only. If you dream of a staircase, do not take the next step down. Report the dream to the oversight office at once. On Fridays, you may encounter a man in black clothing. He is not employed here. Do not engage. Notify security and avert your eyes. Never, under any circumstance, mention the word Raphael, not in conversation, not in notes. Pretend you do not know it exists. I stared at the list, waiting for her to laugh. She didn't. These aren't jokes, I asked. Her mouth twitched something between pity and warning. You'll understand soon enough. She gestured for me to keep walking, and we moved deeper into the corridors. My skin prickled with each step. The rules felt like riddles, but the way she carried herself told me they were more binding than any contract I had signed. The first workstation she showed me looked ordinary enough. A desk, a computer, a scanner, and a stack of reference materials. But tucked into the corner was a small brass crucifix bolted to the wall. I asked if it was decoration. No, she said. That was all. Around us, I saw other employees hunched over documents and fragments of relics. Some typed notes without lifting their eyes, as though afraid of what they might see if they looked too long. A man shuffled past carrying a crate marked Recovered Dead Sea Vicinity. His hands shook as though the box were too heavy for him, though it couldn't have weighed more than a few pounds. We passed a break, area fluorescent lights buzzing, vending machines humming. It should have felt normal, but every surface was too clean, too staged, as if no one had really eaten there in years. A corkboard hung on the wall with notices. One flyer caught my eye. Remember, the rules are for your safety. They are not optional, in red marker beneath. Someone had scrawled, "Ask Henry," but the note had been crossed out, hard enough to tear the paper. The woman noticed my stare and shook her head sharply. "Don't," she whispered. "Not tonight." Her phone buzzed, and she excused herself, disappearing down a side hall. I was left standing in the middle of the corridor, holding the list of rules in my hand, the words burning into my mind. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to crumple the paper and dismiss it as theater, but something inside me, something primal, wouldn't let me. Instead, I folded it carefully and slid it into my pocket, as if even disrespecting the page might provoke consequences I couldn't name. That was when I first heard it, a faint sound in the distance, a slow rhythmic noise that could have been pipes or air ducts. But the longer I listened, the more it shifted, almost like breathing. I told myself I was imagining things, and then I remembered Rule 2. That first night, I barely slept. The air in the dormitory wing was too still, too heavy, as if the walls themselves were listening. My room was small, barely larger than a prison cell. A narrow bed, a desk bolted to the floor, and a lamp that flickered every few minutes, as though something unseen brushed the current. I lay awake with the list of rules on the nightstand, rereading them until the words seemed to bleed into one another. I told myself they were psychological games, nothing more. Some kind of loyalty test, maybe. If I followed the rules without question, I'd prove my obedience. But the wording nagged at me. They didn't sound invented. They sounded discovered, like warnings passed down after someone else had already made the mistake. Sometime after midnight, I drifted into a shallow sleep. That's when I first heard it, the faint, wet sound of someone crying. At first I thought it was another employee, maybe in the hallway. But as I listened, I realized the noise wasn't outside my door. It was above me. And the vents. Rule 2 came back like a whisper in my head. If you hear weeping in the vents, do not respond. Do not search for the source. I froze. My heart hammered in my chest as the sound grew clearer. It wasn't just weeping, it was pleading. A voice, high and trembling, sobbing words I couldn't quite make out. I pressed the pillow over my head, willing it to stop, but the noise only burrowed deeper into the silence of the room. And then I made the mistake. I whispered, "Hello." The crying stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. I lay rigid on the bed, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stay still. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the vent above me rattled, once, twice, and a voice, my voice, answered back, "Help me." The words were mine, but stretched, distorted, as if dragged across rusted metal. The thing in the vents had copied me. I bolted upright and slammed the lamp switch, flooding the room with light. The rattling stopped. The air returned to its heavy stillness, broken only by the faint hum of the building's machinery, but I couldn't unhear it. My voice, crying from the ducts, begging in perfect imitation. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, when I stumbled into the common area, the woman who had shown me the rules noticed my face. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. She only said softly, "You listened, didn't you?" I wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in my throat. She sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "They always do, at first. That's how it starts." I asked her what she meant, but she shook her head and walked away, as if even acknowledging more detail might put her in danger. Throughout the day, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched. Every vent, every dark corner, seemed to hum with expectation. When I sat at my desk, I swore the chair had shifted slightly from where I'd left it. Another rule whispered in my mind. Check your workstation chair. If it has been moved, alert your supervisor immediately. But I didn't report it. Not yet. Because a part of me wasn't ready to admit the rules were real. That night, as I prepared to sleep, I stuffed towels and spare clothes into the vent above my bed. I told myself it was just in case, just to silence the noise. But I couldn't shake the thought that whatever had spoken in my voice might still be there, waiting, patient as stone. And that may be, by answering once, I had already invited it in. The following days blurred together. The work itself was monotonous, scanning old manuscripts, transcribing fragments, logging artifacts. But underneath the routine pulsed something alive, something just out of sight. Every task felt like walking a tightrope across a canyon, with the rules as the only rope to cling to. I tried to forget the voice in the vents, to bury the memory under hours of work. But the unease lingered. It followed me into the cafeteria, where employees ate in silence, never meeting one another's eyes. It followed me into the archives, where shelves of sealed crates seemed to breathe when the lights flickered by the fourth night. I had almost convinced myself nothing else would happen, that maybe I had imagined everything. But then Friday came. I had just finished my shift when I saw him, a man dressed in black, standing at the far end of the corridor. His suit was immaculate, his posture unnaturally still. He didn't wear a badge. He didn't carry a clipboard. He just waited. His face was pale, almost blurred, as though my eyes couldn't quite hold its shape. Rule 6 came back to me instantly. On Fridays, you may encounter a man in black clothing. He is not employed here. Do not engage. Notify security and avert your eyes. I froze. He was too far away to see me clearly, or so I thought. Then, without moving a muscle, he tilted his head slowly, deliberately, as if acknowledging that I had noticed him. My instinct screamed to look away, to walk faster, to pretend I hadn't seen. But curiosity has always been my weakness. Against every shred of sense, my eyes stayed locked on his dot. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. He only smiled. The smile wasn't wide or grotesque. It was small, human, almost kind, and somehow that was worse. My legs shook as I forced myself to turn down another hallway, my throat dry as sand. I told myself I'd report it immediately, just as the rule demanded. But when I reached the security desk, the guards stared at me with flat expressions, as though they already knew. There was a man, I stammered, in black at the end of the hall. The guards exchanged a glance. Then, in perfect unison, they said, "We'll handle it. No questions. No follow-up." Just those words, spoken with the weight of repetition. I walked back to my room in silence, my stomach churning. I tried to convince myself it was handled, that I'd followed the rule. But the image of that man's smile clung to me like smoke. That night, I dreamed of a staircase. It spiraled downward, stone steps slick with shadow. I descended without meaning to, each step echoing in the hollow dark. I knew the rule. If you dream of a staircase, do not take the next step down. I tried to stop, to freeze in place, but my body kept moving, one step, then another. The air grew colder, the silence heavier, until I could hear my own heartbeat in the dark. Just before I reached the next landing, something touched my shoulder, a hand cold, skeletal, and when I turned, the man in black was standing there, smiling that same gentle smile. I woke, gasping, drenched in sweat, the sheets tangled around me. My hands shook as I fumbled for the rule sheet, clutching it to my chest like scripture. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't coincidence. The rules weren't warnings for what might happen. They were instructions for surviving what already had, and I was starting to realize how close I had come to breaking them. Entirely. I couldn't keep living in ignorance. The rules were more than guidelines, more than superstition. They were battle scars, written into policy after someone else had failed. The thought gnawed at me every hour I worked, every corridor I walked. Who had written them? Who had paid the price before me? The woman who'd given me the list, her name, I finally learned, was Claire. Avoided my questions. She answered only what she had to, always with clipped precision. I tried pressing her in the cafeteria one evening, but she only shook her head, eyes darting toward the cameras in the corners. "You'll find out soon enough," she whispered. "Just don't go looking for answers the wrong way." But the problem was, I already had. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered back toward the archives. The corridors hummed with silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of old bulbs. My badge shouldn't have worked on the secured door, but when I swiped, the light flickered green, a quiet click, and the lock released. Inside, the air was colder. Rows of filing cabinets stretched into the dark, each marked with coded labels. I pulled open the nearest drawer and found stacks of old reports, incident logs, security notes, fragments of transcripts. Most were redacted, entire paragraphs blacked out, but the scraps that remained made my skin crawl. Employee 047, recovered with lacerations consistent with self-inflicted wounds, repeatedly claimed the vents wanted a voice. Terminated under protocol, C. Section. Delta breach 2, 3:33 a.m., alarm triggered. One staff member missing. Door sealed. No recovery attempt authorized. I flipped through page after page, my pulse quickening. Each report was colder than the last, reduced to bureaucratic phrases that barely masked the terror beneath. But then I found something different, a folder thicker than the rest. Its tab marked survivor accounts. The first document was handwritten, not typed, not redacted, just raw, desperate words on yellowing paper. If you're reading this, it means you've ignored the warnings. Don't. They aren't rules, they're lifelines. I've seen what happens when they're broken. I watched Marcus answer the crying. It wore his voice like a mask. He's still here, somewhere, but it's not him anymore. My throat tightened. I thought of the night in my room, the sound in the vent, the mimicry of my voice. Whoever wrote this had seen it too. I turned the page. More notes followed, each more frantic than the last. The man in black isn't a man. Don't look at him. Don't let him smile at you. He's a herald. He murks you when you see him. Some say he's one of the horsemen. Some say he's worse. I just know that once he notices you, he never forgets. Another entry. If you dream of the staircase, stop. Force yourself awake. Because it isn't a dream. The staircase is real, buried beneath level 12. Every step takes you closer. They say the bottom isn't a floor, it's a door. And once it opens, the world above won't survive it. I gripped the pages so tightly, they crinkled in my hands. My dream hadn't been random. It had been a warning. The next entry chilled me most of all. Never speak Raphael's name. He was one of them, once a guardian, but something twisted him. Or maybe he chose it himself. Either way, the moment you acknowledge him, he knows you. He'll come for you, and no one comes back from that. My stomach churned. I hadn't spoken the name, but now that I'd read it, the letters burned in my mind like a brand. I folded the paper quickly, shoving it back into the folder, as though the act could erase what I'd seen. And then I noticed the photographs. Tucked in the back of the file were images, grainy and aged. The first showed a barren desert sky, streaked with light that looked less like lightning and more like wings. Another showed a burned-out chapel, its altar cracked and blackened as if struck from above. The final image was worse, a group photo of employees, standing in neat rows in front of the facility. Most were smiling, but on the far edge, half shrouded in shadow, stood the man in black dot. No one seemed to notice him, but he noticed the camera. He was smiling. My stomach turned to ice. I shoved the folder back and closed the drawer, my hands shaking. I needed answers, but every scrap I uncovered only widened the hole. The rules weren't just to protect employees. They were to contain something vast, ancient, and biblical. Something Eschaton research wasn't studying so much as trying to cage. But cages break. On my way out, I nearly tripped over a crate left half open. Inside were stone fragments etched with writing I couldn't recognize. Not Greek, not Hebrew, something older. A tag attached to the crate read, "Recovered, Valley of Meg, D.O. .MEGIDDO. The place Revelation calls Armageddon." I backed away slowly, pulse hammering. My mind raced with every rule, every warning, every shadow I'd seen since arriving. This wasn't research, this was excavation. And they weren't just uncovering history, they were unsealing it. As I slipped back into the corridor, I thought I was alone, but a whisper followed me. Not from the vents, not from my own voice, from behind. "You weren't supposed to see that." I spun around, heart leaping into my throat. The hallway was empty, only the buzzing light above me, trembling faintly in its socket. But I knew what I'd heard, and I knew, with suffocating certainty, that the rules were no longer warnings. They were promises. The night after I found the survivor notes, everything changed. Up until then, the rules had been warnings, guidelines to keep me cautious. But once I knew the truth, once I held the evidence in my hands, it was as if something shifted. The facility no longer felt merely haunted. It felt awake. Sleep wouldn't come. I lay on my bed, staring at the vent above, every nerve in my body strung tight. The towels I had stuffed inside weeks earlier were still there, but I could hear faint scratching behind them, like fingernails against metal. It wasn't weeping this time. It was laughter, low, broken, and far too familiar, my laughter. I pressed my palms over my ears and tried to breathe, but the sound burrowed through the walls, rattling in my skull. When I finally sat up, desperate for silence, I noticed something else. The chair at my desk had moved. Rule 3. Every morning, check your workstation chair. If it has been moved, alert your supervisor immediately. It wasn't morning. It was past midnight, and yet the chair had shifted several inches closer to my bed, its legs scraping faintly against the floor as if dragged by invisible hands. I stood frozen, sweat sliding cold down my spine. The air thickened, humming with a presence I couldn't see. Then slowly, deliberately, the chair moved again, not on its own, but as if something unseen were sitting in it. Leaning forward, I bolted for the door. The corridor outside was worse. The lights flickered in stuttering bursts, casting long, shifting shadows on the walls. The hum of the facility's machinery was louder than usual, like 100 whispers all layered together, and then I saw him, the man in black, standing at the far end of the hall, hands folded neatly in front of him, smile soft as ever. I remembered the survivor's notes. Once he notices you, he never forgets. I turned to run the other way, but the corridor bent in impossible angles. Every turn brought me back to him. The architecture folded like paper, trapping me in a maze where he was always waiting at the end. Finally, desperate, I ducked into a stairwell. The concrete steps spiraled downward, lit only by the weak glow of emergency bulbs. My stomach lurched as recognition struck. The staircase, Rule 5. If you dream of a staircase, do not take the next step down. But I was awake, wasn't I? Each step echoed in the hollow shaft, pulling me deeper. I tried to stop, to force my legs still, but something compelled me downward. My breath came ragged. The air grew colder, and with every turn of the spiral, I swore I heard wings beating somewhere below. Halfway down, I caught movement from the corner of my eye, a shadow clinging to the wall, stretching longer and darker than it should. When I turned my head, it peeled itself free as shape, without form, flickering like smoke, its edges frayed with light that burned my eyes. It reached for me. I stumbled backward, tripping on the steps, my hand scraping raw against the concrete. The shadow's arm stretched impossibly far, fingers brushing the collar of my shirt. My skin seared at its touch, a cold fire that spread across my chest. I screamed and forced myself up, sprinting higher, abandoning the descent. The stairwell groaned around me, as if the very walls resented my retreat. The air shook with a voice, not words, but a vibration that carried meaning all the same. You already stepped too far. When I burst through the stairwell door, gasping, I found myself not in the corridor, but in the archives again. Rows of cabinets, humming faintly in the dark, and in the center of the room stood Clara. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "You went down there." "I didn't mean to." "You can't mean to," she snapped, her voice trembling. "The staircase calls. Once it has you, it doesn't let go." Before I could respond, the overhead lights died. The room plunged into blackness from the vents above. The weeping returned louder, this time multiplied, dozens of voices crying in unison. And then, layered beneath the sobs, came the sound of my own laughter. Not once, but echoing, overlapping, a chorus of versions of myself. Shapes moved in the dark. I couldn't see them, but I felt them, brushes of cold air against my arms, whispers grazing my ear. Something yanked at my sleeve. Another tugged my hair. Clara grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward a faint red glow at the far end of the archive. "Don't listen," she hissed. "Don't answer them. but it was impossible not to. The voices weren't just in the air, they were inside my head, threading through my thoughts. I stumbled, clutching my skull, as images crashed across my vision. Burning skies, rivers turned to blood, endless fields of bodies crawling with shadow. At the center of it all, a door, massive, black, waiting dot. When the glow grew brighter, I realized it came from an emergency exit sign. Clara shoved the bar, and the door slammed open, flooding us with sterile white light. The voices cut off instantly. The shadows retreated like smoke sucked back through a vent. We collapsed in the corridor, both gasping for breath. My skin still burned where the shadow had touched me. Clara's face was pale, her eyes glistening. "You shouldn't have seen it. You shouldn't have heard it. They'll follow you now. And once they mark you, the rules won't save you." I wanted to demand answers, to scream at her for leading me into this nightmare. But the words caught in my throat, because in the silence that followed, I realized something. I could still hear laughter. Not in the vents, not in the halls, in my chest, as though whatever touched me on the staircase hadn't let go at all. Clara kept me alive that night. I knew it. Without her pulling me toward that door, the shadows would have dragged me further down the staircase until I reached whatever lay beneath. 4 hours afterward, I sat in silence, clutching my burned skin, while she paced the corridor, wringing her hands. Finally, she spoke. "You don't understand what you've stepped into. The Echelon group doesn't research. It doesn't protect. It provokes. That's why the rules exist. Not to save us, but to slow the bleeding." Her words sank into me like ice. I demanded she explain, but she only shook her head, lips trembling. "If I tell you, they'll know. They always know." For days, Clara avoided me. In meetings, in the cafeteria, she kept her distance. When we crossed paths, her eyes flicked past me, hollow with fear. I thought she was protecting herself. But then, I started to notice the cracks. One evening, I saw her slip into a restricted section of the archives. The door required higher clearance than she should have had. Out of curiosity, or maybe suspicion, I followed. Inside, she was hunched over a desk, copying fragments of scripture by hand into a notebook she kept hidden beneath her jacket. I cleared my throat, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. "What are you doing?" I asked. She slammed the book shut, her face pale. "Don't. You shouldn't be here." Her voice quivered, not with guilt but with something else, something closer to desperation. That's when I noticed what she was writing. Not translations, not research notes, but names. Page after page of names, scrawled in uneven script, and among them, repeated over and over, was one word I had been warned never to say. "Raphael." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You quiet," she snapped, her hand clamping over my mouth. Her eyes darted toward the corners of the room, as if expecting the shadows themselves to reach for us. "Don't speak it. Not here." I pulled away, heart pounding. "Why are you writing it?" Her silence was answer enough. That night, I couldn't rest. The laughter in my chest had grown louder, more insistent, threading itself into my dreams. When I closed my eyes, I saw Clara's notebook, the endless pages of names, the forbidden word etched into every line. The next morning, I confronted her again, this time in the cafeteria, where the hum of vending machines might mask our voices. "You've been lying to me," I said. "You're not warning me or using me. What do you know about Raphael?" Clara's hands trembled around her coffee cup. Then, quietly, she said, "He listens through me." The world seemed to tilt. She explained in fragments, her words halting, as though speaking them hurt. Years ago, before I ever arrived, she had broken a rule herself. She had spoken the forbidden name aloud while cataloging a fragment of scripture. Since then, she claimed, he had lived inside her shadow, feeding, guiding, using her to map the rest of us. "The rules don't save us. she whispered. They keep us predictable, manageable, so he can choose when to break us. I stared at her, horror building in my gut. And you've been helping him. She laughed a bitter, broken laugh. What choice did I have? Do you think anyone survives here without being marked? Do you think you'll be different? Her gaze softened, then, almost pitying. He's already inside you. I can hear him in your voice. Her words struck deeper than any wound. I wanted to deny it, to scream that she was wrong. But the echo in my chest betrayed me. The laughter, the shadow's touch. I was already carrying the infection. Before I could respond, the lights flickered. A chill swept through the cafeteria, rattling the plastic wrappers in the vending machine. Clara's eyes widened. He's here. She stood abruptly, backing toward the exit. I can't protect you anymore. You'll understand soon. And then she was gone. I sat frozen, staring at the untouched coffee cooling in front of me. The hum of the machine seemed louder now, almost like breathing. And beneath it, faint but growing stronger, I heard my own voice whispering from the dark, closer. The days after Clara left blurred into one long fever. I don't remember sleeping, only drifting in and out of moments, unsure what was dream and what was real. My reflection started lagging behind my movements. My voice would echo a second too late, carrying words I hadn't spoken. The rules no longer felt like guidance. They felt like a trap. Every line was designed to keep me circling, obeying, feeding something I couldn't see. Clara was right. Survival wasn't about following them. It was about choosing when to break them. On the fourth night, I made my choice. I slipped into the restricted archives after midnight, past the guards who no longer seemed to notice me. The staircase from my dreams was there, real, carved into the stone beneath the facility. It spiraled downward, into darkness, sealed off by a gate marked with symbols I couldn't read. Rule 4 echoed in my head. If you dream of a staircase, do not take the next step down. But dreams were no longer the boundary. The staircase existed here, waiting. I pressed my hand to the gate. Cold seeped into my skin, and the symbols burned faintly, like embers under ash. My chest tightened, and the laughter inside me swelled. Yes, come closer. For a moment, I nearly obeyed, but then another voice cut through the memory of Clara's words. He listens through me. If she was marked, if I was marked, then maybe the only way to fight was not to descend, but to drag him out, to expose him. So I broke the rule differently. I spoke the forbidden name aloud. Raphael. The sound was wrong. It scraped against the air, bending it, pulling the walls inward. The lights overhead popped one by one, plunging the archive into shadow. And in that shadow, something moved. A figure unfolded itself from the darkness. Tall and angular, with wings that weren't wings, but jagged shards of light and bone. Its face was a blur, a constant shifting of features, never settling. Yet the smile, I knew it. The same one from the hallway. The same one from my dreams. You called, it said, though its mouth didn't move. The words reverberated from the inside of my skull, vibrating my teeth. I staggered back, heart pounding. What are you? It tilted its head, just as before. What I've always been, a messenger, a reckoning. You gave me a voice. Now, I'll give you silence. The shadows reached for me, long fingers dragging across the floor. I stumbled toward the exit, but the door had vanished. The staircase yawned open instead, steps descending into endless black. This was it. Fight or fall. I reached for the lighter Clara had given me, my only weapon, though against this thing it seemed laughable. Still, I flicked it on, the tiny flame trembling in the dark. The figure recoiled slightly, its form flickering. That was enough. I hurled the lighter at the shelves stacked with old parchment. The fire caught instantly, tongues of flame racing across dry paper and ancient bindings. Smoke filled the archive, thick and choking. The creature screamed not a sound, but a vibration that rattled every bone in my body. The shelves collapsed, the ceiling cracked, and the ground trembled as if the building itself was rejecting what I had done. I ran, through smoke, through heat, up staircases that seemed to multiply under my feet. Behind me, the shadows surged, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind, always there. I didn't stop when I finally burst through the emergency doors into the night air. I collapsed on the gravel, coughing until blood stained my palms. The facility burned behind me, flames clawing at the sky, and still I heard it. Not outside now, but inside, a whisper threading through my thoughts. You didn't destroy me. You released me. The rules were gone. The company was burning, and Raphael was no longer confined to dreams, hallways, or staircases. He was free. I staggered to my feet, staring at the horizon. Sirens wailed in the distance. For the first time since arriving, the air felt alive, not safe, not clean, but alive. I had broken the rules. I had survived. But the choice I made wasn't escape. It was war. The flames rose higher than the facility itself, painting the night sky in shifting shades of red and black. I stood there until my lungs ached from the smoke, until the heat blistered my skin. I thought fire might be enough to erase everything, but fire only clears. Space it doesn't kill what hides inside it. I tried to leave. I stumbled down the dirt road that wound into the trees, heading toward the faint glow of a highway far beyond. Each step should have carried me further away. Instead, the air thickened, pressing against my skin. My chest grew heavy, my breath shallow, as though I were walking deeper underground instead of above it. Then, ahead of me, I saw a light. Not the harsh beam of headlights, not the glow of fire. A pale, steady illumination spilling from a doorway. I froze. It was the lobby, the Eshatan Research Group lobby. Fluorescent lights buzzing, marble floors polished to a sterile shine. The receptionist's desk empty. I looked back. The burning building was gone. The road was gone. Only forest surrounded me, endless and silent. Somewhere, deep inside, the laughter stirred. Not mocking, not cruel, patient. I stepped forward, and my shoes clicked against marble once again. On the desk lay the rule sheet, crisp and white as the first day. 7 rules, unchanged. My hands trembled as I picked it up, eyes scanning the text I had memorized, desperate for some alteration. But there was none, only a new line at the bottom, written in clean black ink. Rule 8. When you leave, you will return. My throat closed. I backed away, but the sliding glass doors had already locked. The air inside the lobby hummed, the same vibration that had haunted my dreams, the same resonance that belonged to him. A voice filled the silence, my own voice. .com measured, echoing from the walls. You broke the rules, and in doing so, you made new ones. I wanted to scream, to run, but all I could do was clutch the paper as the lights flickered overhead. Shadows pooled across the floor, stretching toward me, curling like fingers around my ankles. The fire hadn't destroyed It had never been built of concrete or glass. It was built of law, rules that bent reality, trapping me inside the loop of obedience and violation. Every choice I made only bound me tighter, and now I understood. I hadn't started the rapture by breaking the rules. I had continued it, extended it, ensured it would never end. The rule sheet slipped from my shaking hands. The paper landed face up, the ink glistening under the harsh fluorescent lights. My reflection stared back at me from the glass door, smiling with someone else's mouth. And then, with my own voice echoing calm and final, I whispered the truth I could no longer deny. I work for the company that solves biblical mysteries. And tonight, we started the rapture.